Most people think their life is being shaped by big decisions. It isn't. It's being shaped by what happens in the smallest, fastest moments. The ones no one notices, not even you. A sentence you didn't need to say. A thought you didn't question. A feeling you treated like truth. A purchase you made just to feel different for a few minutes. Individually, they seem insignificant. But repeated daily, they form a pattern. And that pattern becomes your life. This is where most people lose control, not in chaos, but in subtlety. They don't realize their words are weakening their influence. They don't realize their thoughts are distorting reality. They don't realize their emotions are quietly steering their decisions. They don't realize their money is following their internal instability. And because it all feels normal, they never stop to question it. But there is a deeper truth. Your life is not shaped by what you intend. It is shaped by what you can regulate. Your mouth, your mind, your mood, and your money are not separate areas to fix. They are signals of one thing: your level of inner control. This is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming aware enough to stop moving automatically. Because the moment you stop reacting, you start directing. And the moment you start directing, your life stops drifting. Before we dive in, take a second to hit that like button and let us know in the comments where you're listening from. You might be surprised to find someone listening from the same place as you. Chapter 1. Control your words before they control your life. There is a moment that changes everything, and it often happens in less than a second. A sentence leaves your mouth, and instantly, something shifts. A relationship tightens, an opportunity closes, a perception forms that you cannot fully undo. Most people underestimate how quickly words can reshape reality. They think of speech as harmless, as something that simply expresses what they feel. But words are not harmless. Words are force. Words are direction. Words are decisions made visible. If you do not learn to control your words will begin to control your life. Most people speak as if words are an extension of emotion. Something rises inside them, and they release it immediately. Frustration becomes sharp tone. Insecurity becomes over-explaining. Anger becomes attack. Fear becomes defensiveness. They do not see speech as a choice. They see it as a reaction. And in doing so, they surrender one of the most powerful tools they have. Because words are not emotions. Words are instruments. Every word you speak carries weight beyond the moment it is spoken. It lands in someone else's perception. It shapes how they remember you. It influences whether they trust you, respect you, or distance themselves from you. And once spoken, it cannot be retrieved. You can apologize. You can explain. You can clarify. But the imprint remains. Words echo longer than the moment that created them. This is why the first layer of self-mastery begins not with your habits, not with your goals, not even with your emotions. It begins with your mouth, because your mouth is the gateway through which your inner world becomes your outer reality. Your words reveal the stability of your mind. They reveal the maturity of your emotions. They reveal the level of discipline you have built within yourself. Anyone can sound composed when life is easy. Anyone can communicate well when nothing is at stake. But the real measure of control appears in moments of pressure. When you feel misunderstood, when you feel disrespected, when you feel challenged, when you feel exposed. In those moments, your words are no longer just communication. They are a reflection of who is in control, your awareness or your impulse. Many people believe that power in communication comes from speaking more, explaining more, defending more. But if you observe closely, the most respected individuals do not speak the most. They speak the most precisely. They do not rush to fill silence. They do not react instantly. They do not scatter their words carelessly. Their speech is measured, intentional, and grounded. They understand something most people overlook. The value of words is not in their quantity. It is in their clarity. Weak words are driven by ego. They try to prove, defend, impress, or release tension. Strong words are driven by intention. They clarify, guide, and protect direction. Weak words seek validation. Strong words establish presence. When you speak without control, you are not leading the conversation. Your emotions are leading it for you. And emotions, when unregulated, are unstable guides. They exaggerate. They distort. They react to perceived threat rather than actual truth. When your speech is driven by this unstable energy, it creates unstable outcomes. You say things too quickly. You reveal things too early. You defend things that did not require defense. You escalate situations that did not require escalation. And often, you realize the mistake only after the moment has passed. This is where awareness must begin. Before a word leaves your mouth, there must be a moment of recognition, a moment where you understand that what you are about to say is not just a release, but a commitment. Every sentence carries consequence. Every tone carries meaning. Every response shapes direction. This awareness alone begins to shift everything. Instead of asking, "What do I feel right now?" you begin to ask, "What is the right response for this moment?" That question changes the entire trajectory of your communication. It moves you from reaction to intention, from impulse to clarity. There is a simple but powerful principle that governs speech. Intentional words create intentional outcomes. Careless words create chaotic outcomes. When your words are intentional, your life becomes more predictable, more stable, more aligned. When your words are careless, your life becomes reactive, tense, and often filled with unnecessary conflict. And intentional speech begins with a skill that seems small, but carries immense power: the ability to pause. Most regret does not come from who you are. It comes from how quickly you respond. The gap between emotion and expression is where control lives. When there is no gap, there is no control. Your emotions speak for you. But when you create even a small pause, something remarkable happens. Your awareness steps in. Your thinking becomes clearer. Your perception widens. You begin to see not only what you feel, but what is actually happening. And from that place, your words become aligned rather than reactive. A pause of 2 seconds can prevent consequences that last for years. Pause before you respond to criticism. Pause before you defend yourself. Pause before you confront someone. Pause before you react to something that feels like disrespect. That pause is not weakness. It is strength under control. It is the moment you choose to lead yourself instead of being led by impulse. People often fear silence because they believe it makes them appear uncertain. But the opposite is true. Silence communicates stability. Silence communicates control. Silence shows that you are not being pulled by every emotional current. When your mouth slows down, your mind sharpens. Think of a skilled craftsman working with a precise tool. He does not rush. He does not move carelessly. He understands that one uncontrolled movement can ruin the entire structure. So he moves with intention. Every action is deliberate. Every adjustment is measured. Your speech must become like that: deliberate, controlled, purposeful. Now consider the opposite: someone swinging that same tool without control. Every movement creates damage. Every action increases risk. This is what undisciplined speech looks like. It may feel natural in the moment, but it leaves behind consequences that are often difficult to repair. Your words are shaping your life, whether you are aware of it or not. They are shaping your relationships, your reputation, your opportunities, your identity. They are either building your future or weakening it, sentence by sentence. The first step toward mastery is simple, but not easy. You must stop treating words as reactions and start treating them as responsibilities. Before you speak, ask yourself one question. Will this move me forward or pull me backward? If it moves you forward, speak it with clarity. If it pulls you backward, release the need to say it. And if you are unsure, choose silence until clarity arrives, because silence costs you nothing. But careless words can cost you everything. A powerful life is not built on how much you say. It is built on how well you choose what to say. And the person who learns to control their words is the person who begins to control their direction. Chapter 2. The power of pause, silence, and holding your tongue. There is a form of strength that does not announce itself. It does not raise its voice. It does not rush to prove anything. It does not react on command. It simply remains still, aware, and in control. Most people never develop this strength, not because it is beyond them, but because it feels unnatural in a world that rewards immediacy. This strength is the ability to hold your tongue. Anyone can speak. Anyone can react. Anyone can defend themselves when pressure rises. But very few can remain composed when their emotions are asking for release. Very few can sit in the tension of a moment without trying to escape it through words. And yet, it is in these moments that your real power is revealed. Most people misunderstand silence. They see it as weakness, hesitation, or lack of confidence. They assume that if they do not respond immediately, they lose control of the situation. But the truth is the opposite. Silence is not the absence of power. Silence is the concentration of power. When you do not react instantly, you step outside of the emotional storm instead of being consumed by it. You observe instead of being pulled. You choose instead of being triggered. And in that space, you gain something that reaction can never provide: clarity. Think about how many situations in your life escalated, not because they needed to, but because you responded too quickly. A misunderstanding that turned into conflict. A comment that became an argument. A moment of discomfort that turned into long-term tension. In many of those situations, the outcome was not determined by what happened, but by how fast you reacted to it. The first reaction is almost always emotional. It is unfiltered, defensive, and driven by the need to protect the ego. It wants to correct, to justify, to retaliate, to prove. But the first reaction is rarely the wisest one. It is simply the fastest. When you speak from that place, you are not leading the moment. You are surrendering to it. But when you hold your tongue, even briefly, something shifts. The second thought begins to form. The calmer thought, the clearer thought. The thought that considers consequences, timing, and direction. This second thought is where intelligence lives. It is where control begins. You are not required to attend every argument you are invited to. This is one of the most liberating truths you can understand. Not every accusation deserves a defense. Not every misunderstanding needs immediate correction. Not every opinion requires your response. When you believe that you must respond to everything, you place yourself in a constant state of reaction. And a reactive life is a powerless life. Silence breaks that cycle. Arguments survive on fuel. Your words are that fuel. When you remove your reaction, you remove the energy that keeps the conflict alive. Many situations collapse on their own when they are not fed. Many provocations lose their power when they do not receive a response. This is why emotionally reactive people are easy to control. All it takes is the right trigger, a certain tone, a certain phrase, a certain challenge, and they react exactly as expected. Their behavior becomes predictable. Their power becomes external. But a person who cannot be provoked is a person who cannot be controlled. When you hold your tongue, you take your power back from the external world and return it to yourself. There is also a deeper layer to silence that most people overlook. Silence is not just about avoiding mistakes. It is about increasing awareness. When you are not speaking, you are able to observe more clearly. You begin to notice tone, intention, inconsistencies, and underlying motives. You start to see what people are actually communicating, not just what they are saying. When someone is trying to provoke you, silence reveals their intention. When someone is insecure, silence exposes it. When someone is seeking attention rather than resolution, silence makes it visible. Speaking too quickly blinds you to these signals. Silence allows you to read the situation with precision. This is why, in negotiation, the person who speaks first often loses leverage. In conflict, the person who reacts first often loses control. In relationships, the person who rushes to explain often weakens their position without realizing it. Silence is not avoidance. Silence is positioning. It is choosing the right moment instead of accepting the first moment. It is protecting your influence instead of spending it impulsively. It is understanding that your words carry more weight when they are not constant. When you speak less, people listen more. When you speak with intention, your words land with impact. When you are not constantly reacting, your presence becomes stable, and stability commands respect. But holding your tongue is not easy. It requires discipline. It requires self-awareness. It requires the ability to sit with discomfort without trying to escape it. Because in many moments, the urge to speak is not about communication. It is about relief. You want to relieve tension. You want to release emotion. You want to restore control. And speaking feels like the fastest way to do that. But what feels relieving in the moment can be damaging in the long term. True strength is choosing long-term clarity over short-term relief. You train this strength the same way you train any other form of discipline, through repetition, through awareness, through small moments where you choose differently than you did before. The next time you feel the urge to interrupt, pause. The next time you feel the need to defend yourself immediately, pause. The next time anger rises and your response is ready, pause. The next time you feel misunderstood and want to correct everything at once, pause. Each pause is a moment of regained control. Each moment of silence is a moment where you step out of automatic behavior and into conscious direction. Over time, this becomes part of your identity. You no longer feel the need to respond instantly. You no longer feel threatened by silence. You begin to trust that not every moment requires your voice. And something powerful begins to happen. Your words gain weight. Your presence becomes calmer. Your reactions become intentional. Your life becomes less chaotic. Because you are no longer reacting to everything. You are choosing what deserves your energy. One day, you will look back and realize that many of the problems you avoided, many of the conflicts that never escalated, many of the regrets you did not create, all came from a simple decision. You chose not to speak. Silence is not empty. Silence is controlled energy. And the person who learns to control their silence ultimately learns to control their voice. Chapter 3. Train your mind to resist impulses. There is a battle happening inside you every single day, whether you notice it or not. It is not a battle between you and the outside world. It is a battle within your own mind. A battle between what feels urgent and what is actually important. Between what you want right now and what you truly want long term. And the outcome of this battle quietly determines the direction of your life. Most people assume their biggest obstacle is external: lack of opportunity, lack of time, lack of support. But the deeper truth is this: the greatest obstacle most people face is an untrained mind that reacts faster than it reflects. Your mind is powerful, but power without direction becomes chaos. When your mind is left untrained, it behaves like a system driven by impulses. Fast, emotional, and reactive. It pulls your attention toward what is loud, what is immediate, what feels urgent. It does not ask whether something is aligned with your future. It asks whether it satisfies the moment. This is why you overthink situations that do not matter. This is why you act on urges you later regret. This is why you delay important work, but respond instantly to distractions. This is why fear can feel more real than possibility, even when there is no evidence to support it. The untrained mind is not your enemy, but it is not your leader either. It is a tool, and like any tool, it must be guided. Most people make a critical mistake. They believe that their thoughts are commands. They assume that if a thought appears, it must be followed, analyzed, or believed. But this is not true. Your thoughts are not instructions. Your thoughts are suggestions. Some are useful, many are not. The problem is not that your mind produces impulses. That is natural. The problem is that you obey them without question. Impulses are fast. They appear before logic has time to engage. They are often emotional, shaped by past experiences, fear patterns, and conditioned responses. They feel convincing because they are immediate. But immediacy is not the same as accuracy. The first thought is emotional. The second thought is logical. The third thought is intentional. And the quality of your life depends on which one you choose to follow. If you follow the first thought, you live reactively. You send messages you regret. You make decisions under pressure. You allow fear to dictate your actions. You move quickly, but often in the wrong direction. If you wait for the second thought, you begin to see more clearly. You consider consequences. You recognize patterns. You question assumptions. And if you move from the third thought, you act with intention. You align your behavior with your values. You choose direction over impulse. This is where control begins. Control does not mean eliminating impulses. It means creating distance from them. Between every stimulus and every response, there is a gap. Most people live as if that gap does not exist. They react instantly. But when you begin to notice that gap, even for a moment, you unlock a new level of power. That gap is where awareness lives. That gap is where choice becomes possible. That gap is where your future is protected. At first, this gap will feel small, almost invisible. An impulse appears, and before you realize it, you are already reacting. But with practice, that gap begins to expand. You start to notice your thoughts instead of becoming them. You start to observe your impulses instead of obeying them. You start to separate yourself from the noise inside your mind. And in that separation, something important happens. You realize that you are not your impulses. You are the one who observes them. This shift changes everything. Instead of saying, "I am anxious," you begin to see, "This is anxiety." Instead of saying, "I need to react," you begin to see, "This is an urge to react." Instead of saying, "This thought is true," you begin to see, "This is just a thought." This small change in language creates distance, and distance creates control. When you name an impulse, you weaken its power. You bring it into awareness instead of letting it operate unconsciously. You stop it from blending into your identity. This is fear. This is anger. This is insecurity. This is impatience. The moment you name it, you step out of it. But awareness alone is not enough. After you recognize the impulse, you must redirect your attention. Your mind feeds on what you focus on. If you continue feeding the impulse, it grows stronger. If you shift your attention towards something grounded, something aligned with your direction, the impulse begins to lose its intensity. This is not avoidance. This is authority. You are choosing what your mind engages with, instead of allowing it to follow every distraction. You might redirect your attention to your breath, to your next task, to your long-term goal, to your values, to what actually matters, beyond the moment. Over time, this becomes a pattern. Pause, observe, name, redirect, act. This sequence trains your mind to move differently. Instead of reacting instantly, you begin to respond deliberately. Instead of being pulled by every thought, you begin to guide your thinking. Instead of being overwhelmed by mental noise, you begin to create mental clarity. Think of your mind like a room filled with voices. Some are loud, some are quiet. The loud voices often carry fear, urgency, doubt, and impulse. The quiet voices carry logic, wisdom, and long-term vision. If you are not paying attention, you will follow the loudest voice. But loud does not mean correct. Many of your loudest thoughts are the least accurate. Many of your quietest thoughts are the most valuable. Training your mind means learning to lower the volume of impulsive thoughts and raise the volume of intentional ones. This is not done once. It is done repeatedly. Every time you pause instead of reacting, you strengthen control. Every time you choose clarity over chaos, you strengthen discipline. Every time you act based on intention instead of impulse, you reshape your identity. A disciplined mind does not panic easily. A disciplined mind does not believe every fear. A disciplined mind does not chase every distraction. A disciplined mind chooses. It chooses how to interpret situations. It chooses what meaning to assign to events. It chooses what actions align with its direction. Your impulses will not disappear, but your obedience to them can. And that is the shift that changes everything. You stop sending the message you would regret. You stop making decisions in moments of pressure. You stop overreacting to situations that do not deserve your energy. You stop allowing temporary thoughts to dictate permanent actions. Little by little, your mind becomes your ally instead of your obstacle. You begin to trust your thinking. You begin to feel more stable. You begin to move with clarity, even when circumstances are uncertain, because you are no longer reacting to your mind. You are leading it, and the person who learns to lead their mind becomes the person who leads their life. Chapter 4. Reprogram your mindset for clarity and stability. Your mind is not just where thoughts happen. It is the system through which your entire life is interpreted. Every decision you make, every opportunity you take or avoid, every risk you embrace or retreat from, is filtered through the structure of your mindset. And yet, most people never question that structure. They live inside a mindset they did not consciously choose, a mindset shaped by past experiences, early conditioning, emotional wounds, and repeated narratives they absorbed without awareness. Over time, these patterns harden into beliefs, and those beliefs begin to feel like reality. But your mindset is not reality. It is a lens. Two people can face the same situation and walk away with completely different conclusions. One sees rejection as proof of inadequacy. The other sees it as information for improvement. One sees discomfort as danger. The other sees it as growth. One sees failure as an endpoint. The other sees it as a necessary step. The situation does not change. The mindset does. And that difference changes everything. Most people assume their mind reflects the world as it is. But in truth, the mind behaves more like a projector than a mirror. It casts meaning onto events based on the beliefs it already holds. If those beliefs are rooted in fear, doubt, or past pain, then even neutral situations can feel threatening. This is why someone can have ability and still hesitate. Why someone can have opportunity and still withdraw. Why someone can be capable and still feel stuck. The limitation is not always external. It is internal programming that has not been updated. Think about how many of your current reactions are shaped by experiences that no longer exist. A moment of embarrassment years ago, a failure that left an emotional mark, a rejection that created a quiet belief about your worth, words spoken by someone else that you accepted as truth without question. These moments may be in the past, but the beliefs they created are still active, and unless you examine them, they continue to influence how you think, how you act, and how you see yourself. This is where reprogramming begins, not by forcing positivity, not by denying difficulty, but by bringing awareness to what is already running beneath the surface. You must begin to notice the internal scripts that guide your reactions, the quiet sentences that repeat in your mind. I'm not ready. I always mess this up. This probably won't work. I'm not good enough. I can't change. These are not facts. They are patterns. They are interpretations that became automatic through repetition. And because they are repeated, they begin to feel true. But here is a truth that shifts everything. A belief is not something you are born with. A belief is something you have practiced, and anything practiced can be changed. The first step is recognition. You must step back and ask yourself, where did this belief come from? Is it based on consistent truth, or on a single moment that I never questioned? Does it support the direction I want to move in, or does it keep me limited? Most people never ask these questions. They live inside their beliefs as if they are permanent structures. But the moment you question a belief, you loosen its grip. You move from being controlled by it to observing it. And observation creates choice. Once you see a belief clearly, the next step is to replace it. But not with empty statements or unrealistic affirmations. Replacement must be grounded in something believable, something you can act on. Instead of saying, I am perfect, you say, I am improving. Instead of saying, I never fail, you say, I am learning how to handle challenges better. Instead of saying, I can't, you say, I am developing the ability. This is not about lying to yourself. It is about updating your internal language to reflect growth instead of limitation. But words alone are not enough. The mind learns fastest through action. If you want to change a belief, you must create evidence. When your old mindset says, don't try, you take a small step forward. When it says, you will fail, you act anyway and observe the outcome. When it says, you are not capable, you do something that proves otherwise, even in a small way. Each action becomes a piece of evidence. Each piece of evidence begins to reshape your belief. Over time, these small actions accumulate. They form a new pattern, and that pattern becomes your new mindset. You are not transforming overnight. You are updating gradually. Think of your mind like a space that has not been cleaned in a long time. Old thoughts, outdated beliefs, unnecessary assumptions, all collecting over time. If you never clear it, it becomes cluttered, confusing, heavy. Reprogramming your mindset is not just about adding new beliefs. It is also about removing what no longer belongs. Let go of beliefs that were built in fear. Let go of narratives that came from temporary pain. Let go of assumptions that were never questioned. You are not required to carry every thought you have ever believed. You are allowed to release what no longer serves your direction. And once you begin to clear that space, something important happens. Clarity returns. When your mind is not crowded by outdated patterns, you begin to think more clearly. You begin to respond more calmly. You begin to see situations with more accuracy. Stability follows clarity. You stop overreacting to small setbacks. You stop doubting yourself at every step. You stop interpreting every challenge as a threat. You begin to move through life with a steady sense of direction. Not because everything is easy, but because your internal structure is stronger. A clear mindset is not something you find. It is something you build. You build it by choosing what you believe. You build it by questioning what limits you. You build it by acting in alignment with who you are becoming. And as your mindset becomes clearer, your life becomes more stable. Because you are no longer reacting to every situation through the lens of the past. You are seeing it through the lens of growth. And that changes everything. Chapter 5. Build emotional discipline instead of emotional reactivity. There is a quiet force shaping your life more than you realize. It is not your plans. It is not your goals. It is not even your intentions. It is your ability or inability to regulate your emotions. You can have clarity about what you want. You can have a structured plan. You can even have the right opportunities in front of you. But if your emotional state is unstable, everything you build becomes fragile. You start strong, then collapse under pressure. You feel focused, then become overwhelmed. You commit to change, then abandon it when discomfort appears. This is the hidden pattern behind many repeated failures. Not lack of ability, but lack of emotional discipline. Emotions themselves are not the problem. Emotions are natural. They are signals. They are part of your internal guidance system. The problem begins when emotions are allowed to dictate direction. When emotions become commands instead of information. When feelings become decisions. Think about how many times a moment of emotion led you somewhere you did not intend to go. A reaction that escalated into conflict. A decision made in frustration. A message sent from insecurity. A promise broken because your mood shifted. In those moments, it was not your logic that was leading you. It was your emotional state, and emotional states are temporary. This is what makes emotional reactivity so dangerous. It allows something temporary to create something lasting. A few seconds of anger can damage years of trust. A moment of fear can prevent an opportunity that may never return. A wave of insecurity can cause you to withdraw from something that could have changed your direction. Without emotional discipline, your life becomes inconsistent. You are not stable because your internal state is not stable. But emotional discipline is not about suppressing how you feel. It is about learning how to feel without losing control. You can feel anger without becoming destructive. You can feel fear without becoming paralyzed. You can feel sadness without collapsing. You can feel pressure without losing clarity. This is the difference between emotional experience and emotional surrender. Most people do not realize how quickly emotion takes over. The moment a strong feeling arises, the body reacts. The heart rate changes. The breath shortens. The mind narrows. Your focus shifts toward what feels urgent rather than what is important. This is not weakness. This is biology. Your nervous system is designed to react quickly to perceived threats. It prioritizes speed over accuracy. It prepares you to act before you have time to think. But in modern life, many of these threats are not physical dangers. They are conversations, expectations, pressures, and internal interpretations. Yet your system reacts as if they are immediate dangers. And if you do not intervene, your behavior follows that reaction. This is why emotional discipline begins with awareness. You cannot regulate what you do not recognize. Most people skip this step. They feel something and immediately act on it. They do not pause long enough to identify what they are feeling. They become the emotion instead of observing it. But the moment you can say, "This is anger," instead of "I am angry," something shifts. You create separation. You move from being inside the emotion to observing it. And that separation gives you space. In that space, you can choose. Instead of reacting instantly, you begin to respond deliberately. After awareness comes regulation. When a strong emotion rises, your first task is not to act. Your first task is to stabilize your internal state. One of the simplest ways to do this is through time and breath. When emotion peaks, your system is overloaded. If you act in that moment, you are acting from intensity, not clarity. But if you allow time to pass, even briefly, the intensity begins to reduce. There is a reason why many emotional spikes last only a short period if they are not reinforced. Your system is designed to return to balance. But most people interrupt that process by feeding the emotion. They replay the situation. They justify their reaction. They add more thoughts to the feeling. And in doing so, they extend its intensity. Emotional discipline means allowing the wave to pass without adding fuel to it. It means breathing through the intensity instead of reacting within it. It means asking yourself simple questions. Is this as important as it feels right now? What part of this situation can I actually control? What response would I respect later? These questions bring your awareness back online. They reconnect you with clarity. They shift you from reaction to intention. Over time, this becomes a pattern. Instead of reacting immediately, you pause. Instead of escalating, you stabilize. Instead of acting from emotion, you act from direction. Each time you do this, you strengthen your emotional threshold. You become less reactive. You become more grounded. You become more consistent. And consistency is where real strength is built. Emotional discipline is not about eliminating emotions. It is about creating stability within them. You will still feel everything. You will still experience stress, frustration, disappointment, excitement, and pressure. But those feelings will no longer control your behavior. You will begin to notice something important. You are not your emotions. You are the one experiencing them. And when you understand this, your relationship with emotion changes. You stop fearing it. You stop being controlled by it. You begin to use it as information instead of instruction. Emotionally disciplined people are not cold. They are not detached. They simply do not allow emotions to make decisions for them. They move through life with steadiness. They communicate with clarity. They stay aligned with their direction, even when their internal state fluctuates. They do not abandon progress because of temporary discomfort. They do not create chaos in moments of intensity. They remain centered. This is what makes them reliable. This is what makes them strong. Because strength is not measured when everything feels easy. Strength is measured in moments when emotion rises and you still choose clarity. Without emotional discipline, life becomes unpredictable. With emotional discipline, life becomes stable. You stop being pulled in different directions. You stop reacting to every situation. You begin to move forward with consistency. And consistency, over time, creates results. Not because you are perfect, but because you are stable. And stability is what allows everything else in your life to grow. Chapter 6. Master the nervous system. How to calm inner storms. What you call emotion is often not just a thought. It is a physical event happening inside your body. Your heart rate shifts. Your breathing changes. Your muscles tighten. Your attention narrows. Your system prepares for action before your mind has fully understood what is happening. This is not weakness. This is design. Your nervous system is built to protect you. It constantly scans your environment for signals of safety or threat. It does not wait for logic. It reacts first, analyzes later. This is why you can feel overwhelmed before you can explain why. This is why your body can enter a state of tension even when nothing dangerous is actually happening. And if you do not understand this system, you will spend your life trying to control your reactions only at the level of thought, while the real driver remains beneath your awareness. Emotional discipline begins in the mind, but emotional stability is rooted in the body. If your nervous system is constantly activated, your mind will struggle to stay clear. If your body is tense, your thoughts will follow that tension. If your internal state is overloaded, your decisions will reflect that overload. This is why mastering your nervous system is not optional. It is essential. Many people believe they have a thinking problem, when in reality, they have a regulation problem. They try to think their way out of emotional states that are physiological in nature. They try to reason with anxiety, while their body is still in a state of alarm. But clarity cannot exist in a system that feels unsafe. Before you can think clearly, your system must feel stable. This is where awareness deepens. When a strong reaction arises, instead of immediately analyzing the situation, you begin by observing your body. Is your breathing shallow? Is your chest tight? Is your jaw tense? Is your body preparing for action? These are signals. They tell you that your system is activated. And when your system is activated, your priority is not reaction. Your priority is regulation. One of the most powerful principles you can understand is this: your body must calm down before your mind can make wise decisions. You cannot force clarity. You create the conditions for clarity, and those conditions begin with calming your internal state. The simplest and most effective tool for this is your breath. Breathing is one of the few processes in your body that is both automatic and controllable. It acts as a bridge between your conscious awareness and your nervous system. When your breath is fast and shallow, your system interprets that as danger. When your breath is slow and deep, your system interprets that as safety. This is not abstract. This is biological. When you slow your breathing, you send a signal to your system that it can relax. Your heart rate begins to stabilize. Your muscles begin to release tension. Your mind begins to widen its perspective. And from that state, better decisions become available. There is a simple process you can use in moments of emotional intensity. Pause. Inhale slowly. Exhale even slower. Repeat. You do not need complexity. You need consistency. As you breathe, do not rush to solve the situation. Do not rush to respond. Allow your system to settle. Allow the intensity to pass. Because here is something most people do not realize. Emotional peaks are temporary. The strongest wave of an emotion often lasts a short period if it is not reinforced. But when you add thought after thought, reaction after reaction. You extend that wave. You turn a moment into a pattern. Mastery is learning to let the wave pass without building a storm around it. Another important shift is understanding that not all urgency is real. When your system is activated, everything feels urgent. You feel the need to respond, to act, to fix, to escape. But urgency is often a signal from your nervous system, not a reflection of reality. When you recognize this, you begin to question the impulse to act immediately. You begin to ask, is this truly urgent, or does it just feel urgent? This question creates space, and space restores control. From a deeper perspective, your nervous system is not only responding to the present, it is also responding to the past. Old experiences, unresolved stress, repeated patterns, all of these shape how your system reacts. This is why certain situations trigger strong reactions even when they seem small. Your response is not just about the present moment. It is about accumulated experience. Understanding this removes self-judgment. You stop seeing your reactions as flaws. You begin to see them as signals. And once you see them as signals, you can work with them instead of fighting them. You begin to train your system, not by forcing it to be calm, but by repeatedly showing it that it is safe to slow down. Each time you pause instead of reacting, your system learns. Each time you breathe instead of escalating, your system adapts. Each time you choose stillness instead of impulse, your baseline begins to shift. Over time, you become less reactive, not because life becomes easier, but because your internal system becomes more stable. You begin to notice that situations that once overwhelmed you no longer have the same effect. Your responses become slower. Your thinking becomes clearer. Your presence becomes calmer. This is not suppression. This is regulation. And regulation leads to freedom. Because when your nervous system is stable, you are no longer driven by internal storms. You are not reacting to every spike of emotion. You are not pulled into every moment of tension. You remain grounded. And from that grounded state, everything changes. Your words become more measured. Your thoughts become more accurate. Your emotions become more manageable. Your decisions become more aligned. This is the deeper layer of self-control, not forcing yourself to behave differently, but creating an internal state where better behavior becomes natural. A calm system creates a clear mind. A clear mind creates intentional action, and intentional action creates a stable life. The person who masters their nervous system is not someone who never feels intensity. They are someone who knows how to return to center, again and again, no matter what arises. Chapter 7. Stop letting your mood dictate your future. There is something subtle, almost invisible, that quietly shapes the direction of most lives. It is not a major decision. It is not a single mistake. It is the habit of acting based on mood. Mood feels harmless. It feels honest. It feels natural to say, I don't feel like it today, or I'll do it when I'm in the right state. But beneath that habit is a pattern that erodes consistency, weakens identity, and fragments progress. Because your mood is temporary, your future is not. When your mood becomes the authority behind your actions, your life becomes unpredictable. You move forward when you feel motivated. You stop when you feel tired. You commit when you feel inspired. You withdraw when you feel uncertain. Your direction changes with your emotional weather, and emotional weather changes constantly. It changes with sleep, with stress, with conversations, with environment, with small inconveniences, with thoughts that appear and disappear throughout the day. If you build your actions on something that's unstable, your results will always be unstable. This is why so many people feel like they are starting over again and again. Not because they lack ability, but because they lack consistency. And consistency cannot exist in a system where mood is in control. A mood-driven life is a stop-and-go life. You accelerate, then pause. You build momentum, then lose it. You begin, then retreat. Over time, this creates frustration, not because you are incapable, but because you are not anchored. Your identity is not leading. Your feelings are. There is a critical misunderstanding that keeps people stuck in this pattern. They believe that their feelings are instructions, that if they feel resistance, something must be wrong, that if they feel discomfort, they should stop, that if they lack motivation, they should wait. But feelings are not commands. They are signals, temporary information passing through your system. You are allowed to feel everything, but you are not required to act on everything you feel. The moment you understand this, you begin to reclaim control. You stop waiting to feel ready. You stop interpreting discomfort as danger. You stop letting temporary states dictate permanent outcomes. Instead, you begin to act from something more stable: your identity. When your identity leads, your mood follows. When your mood leads, your identity weakens. Identity-driven action means you act based on who you are choosing to become, not based on how you feel in the moment. It means you show up even when motivation is low. You continue even when energy fluctuates. You move forward even when your emotional state is not ideal. This is not force. This is alignment. You are aligning your actions with your direction, regardless of temporary internal noise. There is a powerful shift that happens when you stop asking, "How do I feel?" and start asking, "What does the person I am becoming do in this moment?" That question changes everything. It removes mood as the decision maker. It places responsibility back into your hands, because the version of you that you want to become does not depend on perfect emotional conditions. That version of you acts with consistency. That version of you honors commitments. That version of you continues even when it feels uncomfortable. Not because it feels good, but because it is aligned. Mood, on the other hand, is reactive. It responds to circumstances. It rises and falls. It amplifies small events into large experiences. It distorts perception. When you feel discouraged, your mind tells you that nothing is working. When you feel insecure, your mind tells you that you are not capable. When you feel tired, your mind tells you to stop. But these are interpretations, not truths. Mood changes how things feel. It does not change what is real. This is why disciplined individuals do not wait for the right mood. They create the right actions, and those actions eventually influence their mood. This is a reversal of the common pattern. Most people wait to feel good before they act. But the truth is, action often creates the feeling they are waiting for. When you take a step forward, even in a low mood, something shifts. You regain a sense of control. You reduce internal resistance. You create momentum. And momentum begins to influence your emotional state. This is how you break the cycle. You stop letting mood determine action. You let action reshape mood. A simple but powerful tool in this process is emotional naming. When a mood arises, instead of becoming absorbed in it, you identify it. This is frustration. This is fatigue. This is doubt. This is discouragement. Naming the mood creates distance. It prevents you from merging with it. You are no longer inside the feeling. You are observing it. And when you observe something, you can choose your response to it. After naming the mood, You take a small action aligned with your direction, not a dramatic action, not a perfect action, a small, deliberate step. You feel tired, but you begin anyway. You feel uncertain, but you take one step forward. You feel unmotivated, but you honor your commitment. These small actions are powerful. They teach your mind something new. They show you that your feelings do not control you. They build internal trust. Each time you act despite your mood, you reinforce a new identity. You become someone who is stable, someone who is consistent, someone who does not collapse when emotions fluctuate. Over time, this changes how you see yourself. You stop identifying as someone who needs motivation. You begin to see yourself as someone who creates direction. This is where real strength is built, not in moments of high energy, but in moments where energy is low and you still move forward. Mood-driven individuals live reactive lives. They follow whatever they feel. Identity-driven individuals live intentional lives. They follow what they have chosen. One is unstable. The other builds momentum. The goal is not to eliminate mood. The goal is to stop giving it authority. You will still feel everything, but those feelings will no longer decide your actions. And when your actions are no longer controlled by temporary states, your future becomes stable, because it is no longer being shaped by something that changes every day. It is being shaped by something deeper. Your direction. Chapter 8. Create an identity stronger than your emotions. Everything you have tried to change in your life, your habits, your discipline, your consistency, has always led back to one deeper layer: identity. Most people try to change what they do without changing who they believe they are. They focus on actions, routines, and short bursts of motivation. But when pressure rises, those actions collapse. Not because the method was wrong, but because the identity behind it was not strong enough to sustain it. Behavior that is not supported by identity is temporary. Identity is the root. Behavior is the branch. Results are the fruit. If you want different results, you cannot keep adjusting the fruit. You must strengthen the root. This is where real transformation begins. Identity is not what you say about yourself once. It is what you repeatedly prove to yourself through action. It is the pattern of choices you make, especially when no one is watching. It is the version of you that shows up when things are difficult, uncomfortable, or uncertain. Right now, whether you realize it or not, you already have an identity. It may sound like this: I lose consistency. I get overwhelmed easily. I start things but don't finish. I react too quickly. I'm not disciplined with money. These are not facts. They are accumulated evidence from past behavior, and because they have been repeated, they feel permanent. But identity is not fixed. Identity is trained. Every action you take is a vote for the type of person you are becoming. Every time you react impulsively, you reinforce the identity of someone who is reactive. Every time you avoid discomfort, you reinforce the identity of someone who withdraws. Every time you break your own commitment, you reinforce the identity of someone who cannot be trusted. But the opposite is also true. Every time you pause instead of reacting, you reinforce control. Every time you act despite discomfort, you reinforce resilience. Every time you follow through, you reinforce trust. This is how identity shifts, not through declarations, through evidence. This is why trying to feel like a new person does not work. You do not become a new person by thinking differently alone. You become a new person by acting differently, repeatedly, until your mind accepts it as truth. At first, this will feel unnatural, because your current identity will resist it. If you are used to reacting quickly, pausing will feel uncomfortable. If you are used to quitting when things get hard, continuing will feel unnatural. If you are used to spending impulsively, restraint will feel restrictive. This discomfort is not a sign that you are doing something wrong. It is a sign that you are stepping outside of your current identity. Most people retreat at this point. They interpret discomfort as misalignment, but in reality, it is growth. The version of you that you are becoming will not feel natural at first, because it is new. And anything new requires repetition before it becomes stable. This is where commitment becomes important. Not commitment to motivation, but commitment to identity. You are no longer asking, "Do I feel like doing this?" You are asking, "Is this what the person I am becoming would do?" That question becomes your anchor, because the person you are becoming does not depend on perfect conditions. They act with intention. They follow through. They remain steady, even when emotions fluctuate. They do not collapse under pressure. They do not abandon direction because of temporary discomfort. They are consistent, and consistency builds identity. There is also a deeper layer to identity that most people overlook. Integrity. Integrity is the alignment between your internal values and your external behavior. When you say you will do something and you do it, you strengthen integrity. When you act in alignment with your standards, you strengthen integrity. When you remain consistent even when no one is watching, you strengthen integrity. And integrity builds trust, not just with others, but with yourself. Self-trust is one of the most powerful forms of stability you can develop. Because when you trust yourself, you no longer rely on motivation. You rely on your own consistency. You know that you will follow through. You know that you will act with intention. You know that you will not abandon yourself when things become difficult. This removes a large part of internal conflict. You are no longer negotiating with yourself constantly. You are no longer questioning whether you will act. You simply act. This is what makes identity-driven people powerful. They do not need external pressure. They do not need constant reminders. They do not need perfect emotional states. Their behavior is aligned with who they are. And because of that, it becomes automatic. This does not mean they never feel resistance. They feel everything. But they are not controlled by what they feel. They are guided by what they have chosen. There is a difference between feeling something and obeying it. Emotionally reactive people feel and follow. Identity-driven people feel and choose. That difference determines everything. Over time, as you continue to act in alignment with your chosen identity, something shifts. What once felt difficult becomes natural. What once required effort becomes automatic. What once felt forced becomes part of who you are. You no longer have to think about whether to pause before speaking. You do it. You no longer have to force yourself to stay consistent. You remain consistent. You no longer have to fight impulses constantly. You have trained yourself to respond differently. This is when identity becomes stable. And when identity is stable, behavior follows effortlessly. You are no longer relying on discipline as something external. You have become disciplined. You are no longer trying to control yourself. You are someone who is in control. This is the goal, not temporary improvement. Permanent transformation. Becoming someone whose internal structure is strong enough to hold their life together under pressure. Someone who does not collapse when emotions rise. Someone who does not react impulsively when challenged. Someone who does not abandon direction when things feel difficult. Someone who leads themselves, because the person who can lead themselves in any state becomes someone who can build anything. And that is the power of identity. Chapter 9. Take back control of your money. Money reveals the truth about you faster than almost anything else in your life. Not the version of you that you present, not the version of you that you intend to be, but the version of you that actually makes decisions under pressure, under emotion, under desire. Because money does not respond to what you say. It responds to what you repeatedly do. Many people believe they have a money problem. They believe the issue is income, opportunity, or circumstance. And while those factors matter, they are rarely the root. The deeper issue is control. Money exposes patterns. If you are disciplined, money becomes stable. If you are reactive, money becomes unstable. If you are intentional, money becomes a tool. If you are impulsive, money becomes temporary. This is why money is not just financial. It is psychological. It is emotional. It is behavioral. Every financial decision you make is influenced by your internal state. You spend when you are stressed. You spend when you are bored. You spend when you are excited. You spend when you feel like you deserve something. You spend when you feel like you lack something. In all of these moments, the decision is not coming from logic. It is coming from emotion. And emotional decisions are rarely aligned with long-term outcomes. This is what makes emotional spending so dangerous. It does not feel like sabotage. It feels justified. It feels small. It feels harmless. But over time, these small decisions accumulate. They create patterns. And those patterns shape your financial reality. A purchase made to relieve stress may seem insignificant, but repeated often enough, it becomes a habit. And that habit becomes a system that quietly pulls money away from your future and into temporary relief. This is how financial instability forms, not from one large mistake, but from many small, emotionally driven decisions. There is another pattern that reinforces this cycle: avoidance. When people feel overwhelmed by their finances, they often avoid looking at them. They delay checking their balance. They ignore spending patterns. They postpone difficult decisions. This avoidance creates distance, and distance removes control, because you cannot manage what you refuse to see. Clarity is the beginning of control. When you look at your financial reality honestly, without judgment, something shifts. You move from uncertainty to awareness, and awareness allows direction. You begin to see where your money is going. You begin to recognize patterns. You begin to understand what is aligned and what is not. From that point, change becomes possible. But awareness alone is not enough. Structure is required. Without structure, even the best intentions collapse. You can want to save. You can want to invest. You can want to improve. But if your money has no direction, it will follow your impulses. Structure creates boundaries. It assigns purpose. It removes guesswork. Instead of deciding in every moment what to do with your money, you create a system that guides your decisions. Money for essentials. Money for growth. Money for future security. Money for flexibility. When your money has defined roles, you reduce emotional interference. You no longer rely on how you feel in the moment. You rely on the structure you have created. This is where control begins to stabilize. Another critical shift is learning to pause before spending. Just as a pause protects your words, it also protects your money. When the urge to buy something appears, it often comes with a sense of urgency. You feel like you need it now. You feel like delaying will cause you to miss something. But most of these impulses are temporary. If you pause, even briefly, the intensity decreases. And in that space, you can ask yourself, is this a real need or a temporary feeling? Will this still matter tomorrow? Is this aligned with my long-term direction? These questions bring clarity. They shift the decision from impulse to intention, and many times you will realize that the urge was not about the item itself. It was about the feeling. Another important aspect of financial control is separating your identity from your spending. Many people use money to shape how they are perceived. They buy to feel equal. They buy to feel successful. They buy to feel validated. But this creates a fragile system, because your sense of value becomes tied to external things. And maintaining that image requires constant spending. True financial stability begins when you stop using money to prove something and start using money to build something. Your value is not defined by what you can purchase. It is defined by what you can control. When you shift your focus from appearance to stability, your relationship with money changes. You begin to see money not as a tool for immediate satisfaction, but as a resource for long-term direction. You begin to prioritize security over impulse, growth over distraction, freedom over temporary comfort. This shift is not dramatic. It is gradual. Each time you choose not to spend impulsively, you reinforce control. Each time you track your behavior, you reinforce awareness. Each time you follow your structure, you reinforce discipline. Over time, these actions build a new pattern, and that pattern builds a new financial identity. You become someone who manages money with intention, someone who does not react to every urge, someone who does not avoid reality, someone who directs resources with clarity. This is where financial control turns into financial strength. Not because you earn more, but because you manage better. And when you manage better, everything changes. Your stress decreases, your options expand, your future becomes more stable. Because money is no longer controlling you. You are controlling it. Chapter 10. Break the cycle of emotional spending and financial escape. There is a pattern that hides in plain sight, and most people never recognize it for what it truly is. They believe they are buying things, but in reality, they are trying to change how they feel. A purchase is rarely just a purchase. It is often an emotional response disguised as a decision. It is a way to soothe discomfort, to escape boredom, to reward effort, to fill a sense of lack, or to create a temporary feeling of control. This is the cycle of emotional spending, and if it is not understood, it quietly erodes your financial stability over time. The mind is constantly seeking relief. When you feel stress, your system looks for a way to reduce it. When you feel empty, your system looks for stimulation. When you feel insecure, your system looks for something that restores a sense of worth. Spending provides that momentary shift. You buy something, and for a brief moment, you feel better. The anticipation creates excitement. The act of purchasing creates a sense of control. The newness creates stimulation. Your internal state changes, even if only for a short time. But the relief is temporary, and once it fades, the original feeling returns, sometimes stronger. This is where the cycle begins. You feel discomfort. You spend to relieve it. The relief fades. You feel discomfort again, and without awareness, you repeat the same behavior. Over time, this becomes automatic. You no longer question the impulse. You respond to it, and each repetition reinforces the pattern. The problem is not the purchase itself. The problem is the reason behind it. Because when spending becomes a form of emotional regulation, your financial decisions are no longer based on logic or direction. They are based on how you feel in the moment. And as you have already seen, feelings change constantly. This makes your financial behavior unpredictable. One day, you are disciplined. The next day, you are impulsive. One moment, you are focused. The next moment, you are distracted by something that promises immediate satisfaction. This inconsistency prevents long-term stability. There is also a deeper layer to this pattern: identity. Many people use money not just to feel better, but to feel like someone. They buy to feel successful. They buy to feel ahead. They buy to feel equal to others. They buy to match an image they believe they need to maintain. But this creates a fragile loop, because the feeling of being enough becomes dependent on external things. And external things always require more. More purchases, more upgrades, more validation. This is not freedom. This is dependency. And dependency drains both your resources and your peace. Breaking this cycle does not begin with restriction. It begins with awareness. You must start to notice the moment before the purchase, the moment where the urge appears. That moment is where the real decision is being made, not at the checkout, not after, before. When the impulse first rises, it often feels urgent. It feels justified. It feels like something you need to act on immediately. But if you pause, even briefly, something becomes clear. The urgency begins to fade. And in that space, you can ask a different question. What am I actually trying to feel right now? This question shifts your awareness from the object to the emotion. Are you trying to relieve stress? Are you trying to escape boredom? Are you trying to feel rewarded? Are you trying to feel more secure? Once you identify the underlying feeling, the impulse loses some of its power, because you see it for what it is, not a need, a response. From there, you can choose differently. Instead of using money to regulate your state, you begin to regulate your state directly. If you are stressed, you slow down. If you are bored, you engage in something meaningful. If you feel empty, you reconnect with something that brings depth instead of distraction. This is where control shifts. You are no longer using money as a solution for internal discomfort. You are addressing the discomfort itself. Another important step is delaying the decision. When you feel the urge to buy, you do not immediately say no. You say, "Not now." You create distance. You give yourself time. Because most impulses lose their intensity when they are not acted on immediately. What feels urgent in one moment often feels unnecessary later. This delay allows logic to return. It allows you to evaluate the decision from a calmer state. And often, you will realize that the purchase was never truly needed. It was simply a reaction. There is also a biological component to this cycle. Your brain responds to novelty and reward. When you anticipate a purchase, your brain releases dopamine. This creates a feeling of excitement. But the dopamine is tied to the anticipation, not the actual outcome. Once the purchase is made, the feeling decreases. This is why repeated spending does not create lasting satisfaction. It creates repeated seeking. Understanding this changes how you see the urge. You realize that the feeling is not about the object. It is about the chemical response. And that response can be managed, not by eliminating it, but by not being controlled by it. Over time, as you begin to pause, observe, and choose differently, the cycle weakens. The urges do not disappear completely, but your response to them changes. You begin to feel less pulled, less reactive, more stable. You no longer need to act on every impulse, and something important begins to grow. Self-respect. Because each time you choose long-term stability over short-term relief, you reinforce a new identity. You become someone who does not escape through spending, someone who does not depend on external things for internal balance, someone who can sit with discomfort without needing to remove it immediately. This is where financial discipline becomes emotional strength, not separate. connected. Because the way you handle money is deeply tied to how you handle yourself. When you can regulate your internal state without needing external compensation, your financial behavior stabilizes. Your decisions become clearer. Your patterns become consistent. Your future becomes stronger. And the cycle that once controlled you begins to break. Not through force, but through awareness, pause, and choice. Chapter 11. Build wealth habits that last. Wealth is not created in a single moment. It is not the result of one perfect decision, one breakthrough, or one opportunity. It is built slowly, quietly, through repeated actions that most people overlook because they seem too small to matter. But those small actions are exactly what matter most. Because wealth is not an event. It is a pattern. Many people approach money with intensity, but not consistency. They feel motivated. They make changes. They try to improve. But when that motivation fades, their behavior returns to old patterns. This creates a cycle of starting and stopping, improving and collapsing. And this cycle prevents long-term growth. Wealth does not belong to those who act intensely. It belongs to those who act consistently. Consistency creates rhythm, and rhythm creates stability. The habits you practice daily determine your financial direction far more than the goals you set occasionally. You can have a clear goal to save, to invest, to grow your money. But if your daily behavior does not align with that goal, the goal remains an idea, not a result. This is why habits matter more than intention. Your habits reveal what you actually do, not what you plan, not what you hope, not what you say, what you repeatedly choose. Many people live reactively when it comes to money. They spend based on how they feel. They save when they remember. They plan only when pressure forces them to. This reactive approach creates instability because reaction follows emotion, and emotion fluctuates. Wealth requires structure, not restriction. Structure provides direction. It removes the need to decide in every moment. It reduces emotional interference. It creates a system that supports your future automatically. When you build financial habits, you are not just changing what you do with money. You are changing how you relate to it. One of the most powerful habits you can develop is awareness. You must know where your money is going, not occasionally, consistently. Many people avoid this because they fear what they will find. They worry that awareness will bring discomfort. But avoidance creates more instability than awareness ever could. Because what you do not see, you cannot control. When you track your spending, you remove uncertainty. You see patterns clearly. You begin to understand your behavior, and understanding creates the ability to adjust. Daily awareness builds honesty. Weekly review builds stability. Monthly planning builds growth. These habits are simple, but when practiced consistently, they create powerful results. Another essential habit is creating structure around your spending. Without structure, everything feels necessary. Everything feels justified. Everything feels urgent. But structure creates clarity. It separates needs from wants. It defines limits. It gives your money a purpose before you spend it. Instead of reacting to every situation, you follow a system. This reduces impulsive decisions. It creates boundaries that protect your future. Another habit that changes everything is learning to pay yourself first. Most people spend first and save what is left. But this approach treats your future as secondary. It prioritizes the present moment over long-term stability. When you reverse this pattern, everything shifts. You allocate for your future first. Then you spend what remains. This is not about restriction. It is about priority. You are prioritizing the version of yourself you are becoming. You are protecting your future before satisfying your present. Over time, this builds security, and security creates freedom. There is also a deeper layer to building wealth habits. Emotional maturity. You must learn to sit with the discomfort of not having everything immediately. You must learn to delay gratification. You must learn to resist the urge for instant satisfaction in exchange for long-term benefit. This is not easy, because your mind is wired to seek reward. It prefers immediate results. But long-term stability requires patience. It requires the ability to say, "Not now," even when everything in you wants to say yes. This is where identity and habit connect. When you repeatedly choose long-term stability over short-term pleasure, you begin to see yourself differently. You become someone who protects their future, someone who acts with intention, someone who does not need constant reward to stay consistent. Over time, these habits become automatic. You no longer need to force yourself to track. You naturally pay attention. You no longer struggle to save. You do it without resistance. You no longer feel pulled by every impulse. You follow your structure. This is when wealth building becomes natural. Not because money appears suddenly, but because your behavior supports it consistently. Wealth is not built through perfection. It is built through direction. You will make mistakes. You will have moments of weakness. You will sometimes act impulsively. But what matters is the overall pattern, the direction you return to. Each time you realign with your habits, you reinforce your identity. Each time you follow your structure, you strengthen your discipline. Each time you act with awareness, you move closer to stability. And over time, this compounds. Just as money grows through consistent investment, your financial strength grows through consistent behavior. You do not need extreme actions. You need repeated, aligned actions. Because small habits, practiced daily, create results that feel impossible when you only look at them in isolation. This is the quiet power of consistency. It builds slowly, but once it stabilizes, it becomes difficult to break. And that is when wealth is no longer something you chase. It becomes something you build. Chapter 12. From Scarcity to Stewardship, a Higher Relationship with Money. Most people think their relationship with money is practical. Income, expenses, savings, investments, numbers, systems, transactions. But beneath all of that, there is something deeper shaping every financial decision you make. Your perception, your internal relationship with money. And this relationship often operates below your awareness. It is influenced by what you were exposed to, what you experienced, what you feared, and what you believed growing up. Over time, these influences form a pattern, and that pattern becomes your default way of interacting with money. Some people operate from scarcity. Others operate from stewardship. Scarcity is not just about having less. It is about thinking from lack. It is the belief that there is not enough. Not enough money. Not enough opportunity. Not enough security. When you operate from scarcity, your decisions become reactive. You may hold too tightly, afraid to lose. Or you may spend too quickly, afraid of missing out. You may compare constantly. You may feel pressure to keep up. You may make decisions based on fear rather than clarity. Scarcity creates tension. It narrows your perspective. It keeps your focus on survival instead of direction. And when your decisions are driven by fear, stability becomes difficult to maintain. On the other hand, stewardship is a completely different approach. Stewardship is not about how much you have. It is about how you manage what you have. It is the understanding that money is not just something to use. It is something to direct, something to handle with intention, something to respect. When you operate from stewardship, your mindset shifts. You are no longer reacting to money. You are guiding it. You see money as a resource, not as identity, not as validation, not as something that defines your worth, but as something that supports your direction. This shift changes everything. Because when you remove emotional charge from money, your decisions become clearer. You no longer feel the need to prove something through spending. You no longer feel driven by fear when making financial choices. You begin to act with calm, with intention, with clarity. There is also a deeper understanding within stewardship. Money is stored energy. It represents time, effort, focus, choices. When you spend money, you are not just exchanging currency. You are directing your energy. You are choosing where your effort goes. You are deciding what you value. This perspective brings awareness to every decision. You begin to ask different questions. Is this worth my energy? Is this aligned with my direction? Is this creating something meaningful or just temporary relief? These questions create clarity. They slow down impulsive behavior. They bring intention into the process. Scarcity asks, what am I missing? Stewardship asks, what am I building? Scarcity focuses on comparison. Stewardship focuses on direction. Scarcity creates urgency. Stewardship creates stability. Many people remain in scarcity because they carry emotional patterns tied to money. Fear of loss, fear of not being enough, fear of falling behind. These patterns create tension, and that tension influences behavior. You may avoid looking at your finances because it feels overwhelming. You may spend to reduce anxiety. You may hesitate to invest because of fear. But avoidance does not protect you. It weakens your control. Stewardship requires you to face reality without emotional resistance, to see clearly, to act intentionally, to take responsibility. This is not about perfection. It is about awareness. When you understand your relationship with money, you begin to see your patterns. You begin to recognize where fear is influencing your decisions. You begin to notice where emotion is overriding logic. And in that awareness, you gain the ability to change. Another important aspect of stewardship is removing shame. Many people carry guilt around money, past mistakes, poor decisions, missed opportunities. This shame creates avoidance. It keeps you from engaging fully. But shame does not improve behavior. It keeps you stuck in the past. Stewardship requires a different approach. You acknowledge what has happened. You learn from it. And you move forward with clarity. You do not define yourself by past mistakes. You define yourself by present decisions. Each new decision is an opportunity to reinforce a different pattern, to act with awareness instead of reaction, to build stability instead of repeating cycles. Over time, this changes how you experience money. It becomes less emotional, less stressful, more structured, more intentional. You begin to feel a sense of control, not because everything is perfect, but because your relationship is stable. You are no longer reacting. You are directing. This is where financial peace begins, not in having more, but in handling what you have with clarity. Because when your relationship with money shifts from fear to responsibility, everything else begins to align. Your decisions improve. Your habits stabilize. Your future becomes more predictable. Not because life becomes certain, but because you become steady. And steadiness creates strength. Money will always flow. It will come. It will go. But the way you manage it determines whether it builds your future or weakens it. Scarcity keeps you reacting. Stewardship allows you to lead. And the moment you begin to lead, your relationship with money transforms. from something that controls you to something you control. Chapter 13. Align your mouth, mind, and mood to support your money. Most people try to fix their life in pieces. They try to improve their finances without addressing their emotions. They try to control their emotions without understanding their thoughts. They try to change their thinking without paying attention to how they speak. They treat each part as separate, isolated, independent. But your life does not operate in separate parts. It operates as a system. Your mouth, your mind, your mood, and your money are not four different challenges. They are four expressions of the same internal structure. And when one is unstable, the others begin to weaken. When they are aligned, everything strengthens. This is why some people feel like they are improving in one area, but still struggling overall. They might manage their money better, but their emotional reactions create instability. They might control their emotions in some moments, but their thinking patterns pull them back into chaos. They might try to think positively, but their words reinforce negativity. Without alignment, progress becomes fragile. With alignment, progress becomes stable. Consider how this system works. When your mouth is uncontrolled, conflict increases. You speak impulsively. You react emotionally. You create tension in relationships. That tension creates stress, and stress influences your emotional state. When your emotional state becomes unstable, your decision-making weakens. You become reactive. You seek relief. You make choices based on how you feel, rather than what is aligned. And those choices often show up in how you handle money. You spend to escape tension. You avoid financial decisions because they feel overwhelming. You make impulsive choices because your emotional state is unstable. The problem appears to be financial, but the root is misalignment. Your mind plays a similar role. If your thinking is chaotic, your emotions follow. If your thoughts are filled with doubt, fear, and urgency, your internal state becomes unstable. That instability affects your actions, and your actions affect your outcomes. A scattered mind creates scattered results. A directed mind creates directed outcomes. This is why alignment begins with awareness. You must begin to see how these areas influence each other. Your words shape your environment. Your thoughts shape your perception. Your emotions shape your reactions. Your financial habits shape your future. When one area is unstable, it creates pressure on the others. When one area becomes stronger, it supports the others. This is where intentional alignment begins. You start with your speech. Your words set the tone of your experience. If your speech is reactive, your environment becomes tense. If your speech is negative, your mindset becomes limited. If your speech is careless, your relationships become unstable. But when your speech is intentional, everything shifts. Your communication becomes clear. Your environment becomes calmer. Your interactions become more stable. This creates a foundation. Next is your mind. You begin to direct your thinking instead of letting it wander. You reduce unnecessary mental noise. You question thoughts that create fear or limitation. You focus on what is relevant, what is useful, what is aligned. A clear mind supports emotional stability. When your thinking is grounded, your reactions become measured. You are less likely to overreact, less likely to spiral, less likely to be pulled into unnecessary tension. Then comes your mood. You stop allowing mood to dictate your actions. You recognize emotional fluctuations without surrendering to them. You regulate your internal state. You maintain consistency regardless of temporary feelings. This creates stability, and stability supports better decisions. Finally, your money. When your speech is controlled, your environment is calmer. When your mind is clear, your decisions are more accurate. When your emotions are stable, your behavior is more consistent. And when all of these align, your financial habits improve naturally. You spend with intention. You plan with clarity. You act with discipline. You no longer rely on motivation. You rely on alignment. This is the shift most people never make. They try to control money directly, but money is the result of deeper patterns. When those patterns are aligned, money follows. When those patterns are unstable, money becomes unstable. Alignment removes friction. You no longer feel pulled in different directions. You no longer act one way and think another. You no longer feel one thing and do another. Your internal system becomes coherent, and coherence creates power. When your words support your thoughts support your emotions, and your emotions support your actions, everything begins to move in the same direction. This creates momentum, not forced momentum, natural momentum, because there is no internal conflict slowing you down. Misalignment creates self-sabotage. You say one thing but do another. You think one way but act differently. You feel one thing but try to force something else. This creates tension, and tension drains energy. Alignment removes that tension. It creates a sense of flow, a sense of stability, a sense of direction. You begin to trust yourself. You begin to rely on your own consistency. You begin to operate from clarity instead of confusion. And this changes everything. Because when your internal system is aligned, your external life becomes more predictable. Not because life is easier, but because you are stable within it. And stability is what allows growth to continue. This is the moment where self-control becomes self-mastery, not through force, but through alignment. Conclusion. Your life does not change in one dramatic moment. It changes in the quiet decisions you make when no one is watching. You have seen the truth clearly now. Your mouth shapes your relationships. Your mind shapes your perception. Your mood shapes your consistency. Your money reflects your discipline. These are not separate areas. They are one system. And when you learn to govern that system, you begin to govern your life. You will not be perfect. You will still feel impulses, doubt, emotion, and pressure. But the difference is this: you will no longer be led by them. You will pause before speaking. You will question your thoughts. You will steady your emotions. You will direct your money with intention. And through repetition, this becomes who you are. A person who does not collapse under pressure. A person who does not react without awareness. A person who builds instead of sabotages. This is self-mastery. Not control through force, but control through alignment. And from that alignment, something powerful emerges: freedom. Because when you can lead yourself, nothing outside of you can truly control your direction. Thank you for listening with an open mind and heart. If a certain chapter or insight resonated most with you, share it in the comments. You might help someone else find exactly what they need today. Keep this book saved so you can return to its words whenever life calls for reflection or guidance. I wish you health, peace, and wisdom in every step you take.